Hey, everybody. Welcome to Dear Asian Americans, wherever you are and whenever you may be listening to this. We wish you all the health and safety in the world. Things are a little bit wonky here in the middle of May. Businesses are oddly opening for some strange reason, but we think everybody should stay home and we will see each other in person, having dinner, enjoying each other, and really enjoying the entertainment and enjoying ourselves from the creations of amazing people who've brought us so much emotion, sometimes tears, mostly smiles, in the ways that our fellow Asian Americans have used their gifts, their talents to really entertain us. My guest today is one of those people who has done that, who has been doing that for so many years. Um, you've heard his music, you've heard his name, you may have actually been a member of one of his many concerts as he's toured globally. Such an honor, so happy and excited to talk to my friend AJ Rafael today. Welcome to the show, AJ.
Hey, thank you so much for that. Wow, that was a great intro. Thank you.
I think
It's just, yeah,
no, we look at people who, the often, I guess the stereotype or the joke is, Asians have a very prescribed path, right? You pick something
sure.
that's a very linear path. I know,
hmm
people in your family have gone that path, people in my family as well. And I think it's really inspiring to see somebody discover their gifts, non-traditional gifts as music is in your situation, and to just go, you know, off the deep end, if you will, and commit yourself to it. Obviously,
Yeah,
timing and just the riding the wave of certain platforms, you couldn't have timed it better with the resurgence and with the popularity of YouTube and other social medium channels. But that's not
sure.
independent of the talent and the hard work that you continue to put in. So really, really grateful for your time. I'm curious to learn throughout the conversation about what you've been up to during the time at home. If you have created some masterpiece music that none of us are ready for. But uh, I want to start with AJ in his earlier years. We know you're from Riverside. We know you started your musical career early, but take us back to little AJ. How did your family end up in
Yeah,
Riverside? What were your circumstances there like? And tell us a little bit about AJ growing up.
sure. Well, shout outs to the city that I actually grew up in, which is right next to Riverside, Moreno Valley.
Mm.
That, yeah, is also in the Inland Empire, and that's where our first house was.
Ah,
But, my mom and dad met in the 80s. And my mom was already here because of another tragic story. Um, and I'm foreshadowing. um, Unfortunately, my mom's first husband came to America, and he got in a motorcycle accident
oh,
and passed away. And my mom was the only one who was allowed to go get him out of the hospital to get his body
man.
to bring back to his family. So I know it's crazy even talking about it now because I always talk about my dad and his death. But recently I've been kind of diving deep into what my mom has gone through to get to this country. And yeah, I don't even mean to start on this crazy thing, but like she came and got his body and, had to find closure in that way. But luckily she met my dad, who was he was already divorced and had a kid, had a child, which is my older half sister Eileen, and they met in happy circumstances, and she joined his choir. So
Oh,
he was a choir conductor. Um, he was a songwriter, pianist. He was like the best musician ever, and he had a competitive choir actually that he would take around LA. It's a Filipino Tagalog singing choir, and they would win competitions and stuff and all these things. And my mom became a part of that choir and a part of that legacy that he was already building on his own.
mhm.
Fast forward a little bit, and they had me in 1989. They got married and they moved from LA. So I lived in LA for a second. They moved from LA to Moreno Valley because my mom um, got a job as a nurse in
Mm.
Loma Linda, which is
Ah,
Inland Empire. So that's how we ended up in the Inland Empire. I think Maybe my dad wanted to get away from kind of the chaos and busyness of LA, but also acknowledge that my mom had a job opportunity out this way. We ended up still driving every Sunday to my dad's churches that he would play at in LA. So a lot of my journey growing up is every single weekend we drive to LA. That's where his sisters are as well. They sang in the choir with him. And he'd play, we grew up Catholic. He would play not only at Catholic churches, but at born again churches, Methodist, different denominations. To me, his religion was music, you know? So that's a big thing that I take with me, is that he didn't care that it was different religions or whatever. He just wanted to share his gift of music. So fast forward a little bit, and he's teaching me piano. I'm 5 years old. My sister was born, well, she's only a year and a half younger than me. And we're doing music together for one of my dad's churches here now in Moreno Valley. So we found a church in Moreno Valley, which is cool because we wanted a home base because we kept hopping churches and stuff. And my mom and dad had me playing clarinet and my sister playing violin, which is cool. So that was for like his choirs every Sunday, and he'd play at all the masses, you know, sometimes. And fast forward a little later, so I'm 9 years old, he creates a children's choir and I start singing. Wow. And I don't normally sing. My dad really pushed piano on me, so I was nothing but rehearsing piano, and you know, I had other teachers as well, and my sister also classical violin and stuff. And then when I was 10, my dad wanted to have a surgery to stop sweating in his hands, because he's playing piano at church. He has rags everywhere, like bandanas and stuff, you name it. And I remember seeing this. I never thought anything of it until my dad told us that he wanted to have surgery for it. I didn't know that that surgery involves, you know, getting into sweat gland, which is like you have to go inside your chest, right? You know, it's something more complicated than I think it was. So he wanted to get rid of that problem. He's in the hospital for 2 weeks. It's his birthday. We're singing around the hospital because there ends up being complications because a doctor effed up and cut something else. I mean, that's very basic of what actually happened. But he ends up catching pneumonia, and 3 weeks in the hospital, he passes away. And I just remember it being so crazy because we went to go visit him. He's in tubes and stuff, and you know, he couldn't even talk. But the last time I went to go visit him, I'll always remember because I came from Knott's Berry Farm because we're just trying to distract ourselves. And I say, I love you. And you just hear it sounds, you know what I mean? Because he has tubes in his mouth. And and I knew he said, I love you back. And that was the last time I saw him. And, you know, unfortunately, my mom got the call that there was a code blue while we were at home. So my mom had been at the hospital every single day, every hour. And I wanted to also note that this is the hospital that she also works at. So she knows these doctors. She knows, you know, everybody. And the one day she decides to go home because everyone's telling her to take a break is when he codes. And I believe that was him kind of, you know, passing away where he didn't want her to experience that, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, fast forward again a little bit, and I'm playing piano for his funeral. And that is, I think, is the beginning of the legacy that my dad gave me. Was like, I just ended up taking over for his choirs at 10 years old. And my mom became the director, and I was playing the piano, accompanying the choirs that he left here. And I think that was such a huge thing that changed the trajectory of what you were talking about earlier, a linear path for most Asian Americans. A lot of my Filipino friends are nurses. Obviously, my mom is a nurse. But that event there was what, caused me to not have any other path. I had no other option. You know what I'm saying? My mom literally never once said, AJ, you should become a nurse. And I know that she had conversations with my dad that was like, hey, my dad's like, I don't think that we should have our kids be musicians, because my dad was like working all the time just to help put food on the table. But my mom, stable job, she's a nurse, she's making a lot of money. She was the one really taking care of us. And he was making $100 per service, only on the weekends. Yeah. So I remember even, before he was dying, before he passed away, he took a job at Texaco for like a good week. He became a bus driver for a little bit, but he had no passion for any of those things. His real love was music. So yeah, that is a big, big journey already in my young years that had to deal with music and tragedy and all these things that led me to purchasing my first guitar and writing my first song.
Thank you. I don't know what quite the right response is for you to have to experience that at 10, which was a time of just being a kid and just what is that, third or fourth grade? There's shouldn't be any worries or any hardship in life, right? And then for your mom, just first being an amazing nurse and doing all that she's doing. I know you posted about her recently and her experiences.
Yeah.
And, thankful to her and everybody else foremost. And again, just having to deal with that kind of tragedy twice, which is even once is unimaginable.
Right.
But I sure I'm not the first person or the last person to ever say it, AJ, but I'm pretty sure you're doing your dad proud, man. Carrying on his name.
Yeah.
Man. So tell us about that time you bought your first guitar, and what sort of legacy did you want to continue for your dad?
Right. Yeah. So yeah, again, you're saying as a freaking kid, right? Having to grow up, and my youngest sister was only 6 months, actually. She was, thank you. I got coffee from my girlfriend. Thanks, Alyssa. My youngest sister, Justine, she was only 6 months when that happened, actually. So, we're running around. I have my sister who's 9 years old, and my mom starts working nights because, it pays a little more money, right? So we had to hire a live-in babysitter, which we had a couple, but our last one ended up being my best friend's grandma, which is so cool because we were so close to her already and we called her grandma and stuff. So, yeah, around that time, taking care of my sisters, who they both love music. And even at 6 months, we knew Justine had like a talent, you know what I mean? So when I got my first guitar, I was 15 years old. And my auntie, who is my dad's sister, my auntie Lucci, her husband, Uncle Jing, played in a band with my dad, and he played bass guitar. So they wanted to get me an acoustic guitar. And I was such a piano guy. Like, I loved piano. I loved pop piano. I don't want to say grew out of, because that sounds so pretentious, but classical music was like, I didn't want to deal with it anymore. Like, I was so tired of classical music, man. And like, church music is cool because I got a lot of stuff that was just the melody and chord names. So I get to improvise a lot, I don't have to read a bunch of notes like in classical music. So my auntie knew that I had a big interest in chords and kind of jamming and stuff, and not necessarily following the music. So she bought me my first guitar. And I remember after getting that, I'm learning all these chords to like Blink-182 songs. And, that was kind of that era of like pop punk rock. So I'm learning power chords and stuff. But another thing that my mom did that I actually barely get to mention is that I convinced her to buy me this 24-track recorder at Guitar Center. It was $1,000.
Whoa.
And I was like, Mom, if you get me this, I promise I'm going to start making CDs. I'm going to sell them and I'm going to pay you back. Like, it was so crazy. Like, I don't know how my mom even thought that I was going to do this. But, like I said earlier, she's very supportive because she knows this is my path now, being a musician. And she bought me that.
How old were you when this happened?
Same year. So I was 15. I was 15 years old.
You were already trying to make a record label out of your bedroom at 15.
Yeah, and technically it was my garage. So I had a guitar. I convinced my mom again to buy me a drum set. I cannot believe she bought me a drum set. This is like a cheap, like $500. Not that $500 is nothing, but
relatively, yeah.
As far as drums goes, relatively, right? So I have all these instruments in my garage and I'm learning them all because I just wanted to have control of everything that I was recording. I didn't want to have to pay someone to come in. So I started learning drums.
Wow.
And I remember pissing off my neighbors and stuff, and like someone banging on the garage door, like, and as it's closing, I'm like, screw you, like whatever. Anyway, I make a freaking 10-track album in this on this 24-track recorder. I find a way to put it on a CD. I ask my friends to help me burn these CDs. I find like those little label makers where you do the stomp thing, where you print on the label. And I had my friends stomping CDs. And it was crazy because as soon as I had these CDs, I put them in sleeves. In high school, I'm literally going around selling these CDs. It was crazy. Like, and this is the time of MySpace. So this is really kind of the start. It's a year before YouTube comes, a YouTube before YouTube like changed my life. So it's like 2004, 2005 is when I'm selling CDs with my friends and kind of giving them incentive to sell 10. My best friend, I had him sell 10. If he sold that much, if we made $100, I'd buy him In-N-Out at the end of the day. Yeah, bro. So that was kind of the start of like this weird entrepreneur like lifestyle that I had, and MySpace was happening, dude. So I would post on bulletin boards like, hey, does anyone have any shows I could play at or whatever? And I start opening up for rock bands because I don't have a band at this time. Rock bands are the only ones having backyard shows. So I would always open because it's just me and my keyboard, playing these songs that I wrote around my school. Huh. And then all of a sudden uploading on MySpace. I had to upload on MySpace before there was MySpace Music. So I had to like put a JavaScript, like real player code.
Wow. That
only had a play and pause button. And I had to put in the, hey, this is my song called so-and-so. Please click play. And then people would start listening to the song that I recorded on my 24-track recorder. Oh, and that was the beginning of like, the whole music online revolution, man. It was wild.
That's wild.
So anyway, then this website called YouTube comes along. It's 2006. I was really trying to find a way to get my MySpace more popular. And I wanted to put videos on my MySpace. That was really the goal.
Really? So you just you saw YouTube as a hosting place to then kick it back to MySpace.
Exactly. So if you look at my first like maybe 100 videos, all of them are like myspace.com/AJ Rafael. I always put that title card at the end of the videos when I was editing them on my laptop.
Interesting. Wow.
I have to shout out my my other aunt as well, who got me my first power book, Mac. So she believed in my music as well. She was my dad's oldest sister, and she bought me my first MacBook. So then I started learning how to, edit on iMovie and use GarageBand for sound and things like that, to make content on YouTube. And at the time, I don't even know what subscribers are until I hit 1,000. And I'm like, are these people paying? Like, what does subscribing mean? I didn't know what it meant, but obviously finding out that it's an audience that wants to see your new videos pop up on their homepage every time they log on.
Yeah.
And I started celebrating all of those things, and every time I hit 1,000 or 2,000, I'd celebrate with, have a comment party or whatever.
Yeah.
This is all kind of before. I didn't think of it as fan engagement. I'm just thinking of it as oh, here's a community. I see these same people commenting on every single video. This is really cool. So, I'm talking to them and getting to know my fans and stuff until it reaches a point where I start getting 100,000 views on each of my videos. And I'm like, whoa, this is a real thing. This could be a cool thing. And all that, bro, just to put my YouTube videos on my MySpace and kind of cross promote, if you will, before that was even a term, So social media, before it was ever a kind of strategy, I think just by habit and because of the things that felt right to me, it ended up becoming a sixth sense to me, and something that I just kind of do naturally. Even now I'm thinking of I'm going to take a screenshot of our podcast to show that we were doing something today. A lot of people, I think, especially now, I'm meeting a lot of actors and stuff and getting into that world. They don't really necessarily have that bone, that social media instinct to be putting yourself out there, which I know takes courage,
right?
And, different things, but also, it helps in the long run. And what we talked about earlier, creating content, not necessarily has to be good content. As long as it's consistent,
right?
Then, you got something. So,
I mean, you're being as humble as anybody can be. So I'm going to brag for you. I realize that my real job here is hype man. You joined YouTube April 23rd, 2006. That's well after, probably, well before most people even knew what YouTube existed. And you have countless videos on YouTube, the earlier ones from 13 years ago, 14 years ago now. Very, very small views, right? And I would guess that a lot of those views came after, well after you uploaded them. But what I'm hearing from your story is just one, grit, tenacity, right? Just post for the sake of posting. Don't try to hack it, as so many people are inclined to do these days, to try to chase the attention, right? Go for clout. Try to find something that you think will get a certain reaction. And what that does is you actually step away from your authentic being and who you are and what you are.
Wow. That's a good,
it is
good
because
analysis of that.
Just be you, and you're going to get some people to love you, and you're going to get some people who don't love you. And that's okay, because do you really want people to fall in love with a different version of who you aren't? Because you can't keep that up, right? You're the same AJ from 14 years ago. You're the same AJ from 10 years ago, or 10 when you were 10, right? 21 years ago. And so that consistency, I believe, and so many other people believe, is the reason why you are who you are today, because you stay true to your mission of honoring the legacy. And what we also hear in your story is the power of your tribe, right? Your mom believing in you, single mom, taking care of 3 kids. Your aunts getting involved because that's the way that Asian families roll, right? When shit happens, we get together, and we have many
Amen.
moms in our life,
Amen.
right? And then it's just finally just you knowing that it's your life story and your life experiences is the content, right? It's this documentation versus
Mm,
creation theory that many people, you don't need to be picture perfect on Instagram, right? Just share your day.
sure.
Sure, sometimes we go out of our way. Just before we started recording, AJ, we were talking about how in this COVID-19 era that we're dealing with, that people care more about the context of what they're watching than the quality of the content that they're viewing. So um, you don't
Yeah.
need 50, I don't know, $1,000 microphones and $5,000 cameras,
Yep.
then having to
Hmm.
wait 3 weeks for some, really expensive editor to make it look shine like a Hollywood movie.
So true.
If
So
you,
true.
look, it's true though, right? If you go back and you probably look at
Hmm.
some of the videos or even Instagram stuff, where you're just like, wait a minute, that outperformed what I thought was going to be. It's probably because your fans were like, holy shit, this guy's real. He's keeping it real, right? And not,
Mm,
um, you know, so many, we see this too often, but, picture perfect photo, Lightroom edited, fake comments, and it's for what, right? Like, because it
I
should be
know.
a representation of who you are, and I think you as a musician, because it's such an emotional medium, right? It's the the words and the music and the story behind it, I think, is much more so than acting, um, much more so than
Sure.
performance art. I think music is one of these things that you can't fake, right?
Right.
I think, there's a lot of different types of popular music, but if you look at your type of music where it's just you and an instrument, you on a stage and you doing all these different things, it's
It's very
not
vulnerable.
choreographed. It's
Yeah.
not, sorry, no hate mail here. Sorry, guys, but like it's not K-pop, right? Like K-pop is very choreographed, and there's a order and a script for everything. I mean, dude, K-pop hasn't really changed at its core in 20 years since I started listening, right? Like it's
Yeah, I mean, yeah, to be fair, yeah, it's a template
correct.
for
It's a
sure.
template, and
And a
everybody
lot of
has a
pop
role.
music is a template.
Um, that's cool. So
Right.
you were one of the earlier pioneers of YouTube. You now have countless videos on there, many with hundreds of thousands of views. Your total count is 189 million, which is mind-boggling. There's 980,000 people, 940,000 people who subscribe to you. Um, but you weren't, obviously, that doesn't start on day one. Tell us a little bit
Hmm.
about your earlier years. Once you realized, when did you realize that YouTube in and of itself would be the bigger potential platform, much so than just using it as a backbone to MySpace?
Yeah, I mean, so I end up going to Berklee College of Music for a year because I was not a very good student in high school. I just knew that I had to get into a school I could audition into, you know, to get in. So obviously, it's a private school, it's very expensive. So, yeah, I stayed there for a year. I saw the check that my mom wrote, and I was like, I can't make you do this again. So anyway, during that year, 2009, YouTube comes out with what they call a partner program, and they have you apply and you have to write like a mini essay on why you deserve to be paid for views and why you deserve to be shared ad revenue with them.
Hmm.
And obviously at the time, I'm thinking like, whoa, what a great opportunity, even though everyone knows now YouTube makes so much money off just
Yeah.
creators in general, and like people who upload content, they are making so much money. I don't even know what the percentage is, but I was like, okay, cool. They're trying to share with us. That's awesome. Which, I don't take it for granted because, to this day, I still receive, a check from Google every month.
Yep.
But during that beginning time, it was a lot of money, especially for me. I wasn't working. And I think that probably in my mind, it shifted to where I was like, if I can make money on YouTube, then why should I not put my focus on this? Because this is
Mm.
something I love to do and I love to put out content. MySpace obviously was really just a promotional thing to kind of get the word out. So when I came home from college, I never went back. I met so many great people. I
Mm.
met my band there who ended up recording with me, making my first EP and all that stuff. And they're all Berklee kids. But coming back, I decided that I needed to start being like really consistent on YouTube because there are other also cool Asian American creators during this time, especially from like 2007, 2011, 12, who were also doing it. And this was the platform that we were kind of finding our audience on, you know? And I was like, I want to be part of this group. I want to meet people like Kev Jumba and Ryan Higa and, you know, Wong Fu Productions and people who were doing it as well. So, you know, really when I came home from college and I started meeting more quote unquote creators, I mean, we didn't call them that back then, but meeting these people and this community of people who are also making YouTube videos and doing it because they love it, but also because we were making a business out of it. You know, I think that really inspired me to go from the MySpace route to YouTube. So, I mean, it's a little different for musicians because on YouTube, you can only make money from original content.
Right.
Most of my content is cover music. You know what I mean? So I also still knew I had to make money in other ways.
Right.
I had to record music and try to sell that music. I had to play shows that would give me more than just gas money. You know what I mean? Like I had to try to find a way where I didn't want to ask my mom for money anymore. By the way, to take it back, I ended up selling all in all 1,000 CDs.
Wow.
Over a couple of years. So I, you know, obviously paid my mom back for
awesome, man. That is so cool. You mentioned the community of fellow Asian American creators, what we know now to be called creators, back 12, 13 years ago when YouTube was just getting started, and 11 years ago when they started the partner program. In hindsight, we realize a lot of things and make sense why YouTube and other internet-based platforms were the right place for people who look like me and you to explore our creative outlets, because we weren't being invited on the mainstream shows. We weren't given space and time on MTV and other platforms to shine. Being in the middle of it, how did you find community with some of the other guys that you spoke of, and what sort of conversations were being had living in the moment of it? Were you guys aware of what was actually happening, or was it just, you know, holy shit, this is a cool way to make music and we're having fun, we're a bunch of young guys? What was that like?
I'd say probably more of the latter. You know, like maybe in the back of our minds we're thinking it could be a business, and that probably did subconsciously like inspire me to be more around people who were like-minded in that way. But it was more, we did meet a lot more in fun circumstances. Like a specific example of how I met Wong Fu Productions. I was having this show in Irvine with Kev Jumba, Happy Slip, an early, you know, Filipino comedian on YouTube, and I was one of the only music acts, along with our friend Victor Kim, who was in Quest Crew. He was a dancer, and Victor invited us to his house after because he lived in Irvine. So we all were there. And the thing that all kind of binds us, if you're at a party or whatever, it's not like you can go showing off your short form videos on the TV and be like, hey guys, watch this, right? Like, here's my comedy stand up. I'm not, you know, like Kev and Happy
now you might. You're like, hey,
you know,
let's stream it on the TV. But back then it wasn't, right?
Yeah, that's so true. Now we probably would.
Yeah.
Or check out this new thing. But the one thing in that dark room that we were all just kind of chilling at, you know, I don't know if I was 21, but I know I wasn't drinking. Everyone else was. And I was, just to be safe, I'll say that. I was sitting there and Victor had an interest in playing piano. And he's like, you play keys? So I had the keyboard the whole night, and I'm playing slow jams. I'm playing all these things. Thankfully, my best friend's older brother introduced me to R&B music and, you know, the 90s bands and stuff, Boyz II Men. So I'm playing all these things, and that's kind of the age group that Wong Fu is in. And these guys, they're a little older than me. They're probably 2 to 3 years, 4 or 5 years older than me. And they're like, yo, this guy's good, man. You know, I'm not shy about saying like I can play anything, because that's just like the way my ear works. Since like, even if I don't know a song, if I hear it once, you know, I'll just pull the chord progressions and play it, right? So like, dude, this guy can play anything. You're like a jukebox or whatever. I remember after that whole, you know, jam session or what it was, that's kind of what brought us all together outside. They're like, hey, your stuff is really good. We'd love to hear your original music. Maybe we could make a music video. I had
Mm.
already seen they've been doing music videos for another artist named David Choi. And
Yeah.
David Choi was the first singer-songwriter I ever saw on YouTube who was Asian. And me and Wong Fu ended up, making a music video together, which at that time, became viral. It's still one of my biggest songs. It's called When We Say Juicebox. Like a lot of people who grew up listening to me, who've been listening to me since middle school or high school or whatever, they really, that song means something to them, especially because it was like my music and Wong Fu Productions mixed into one thing. So it ends up becoming business a little bit because we're creating something, for the audience to see and for us to monetize off of. But it first came into fruition because we were just jamming in a house, having fun after a show. So that's kind of a small example of what the meeting those creators were like.
That's cool. I mean, I don't think it's possible if you look at anybody who's achieved any sort of objective levels of success and influence that you don't script that out, right? Like there's countless things that
Right.
just freakishly, randomly happen, serendipity, luck, whatever, right?
Yep.
Divine intervention, whatever you want to call it, where in hindsight, you're like, whoa, that Irvine show, whatever circumstances made you say yes. And then you not having any plans after to say, let's hang. And then so like all these things, right? Like you just look back at, okay, let's wind back the clock and think of all the things that had to happen exactly the way it did for it to happen. And then looking at how that now has spawned more stuff. It's just humbling, right? Because we realize so much of life's good fortunes are really outside our control. It's just, they happen. And we have to take.
It's so weird. And you saying all these things and me thinking back, and in the beginning of the podcast, you're saying it's a lot of talent, hard work. It's also timing. It is also obviously luck, because if you just got to be ready when that lightning hits, right? For me, I wasn't trying to impress record labels or anything. That wasn't my industry. I still even don't consider myself part of the quote unquote music industry sometimes, because it's just so different from where my mind is. But back then I was like, these are fellow quote unquote whatever content creators or people, independent, filmmakers and stuff. I wanted to impress them to kind of get into their circle. So the fact that I also was like quote unquote impressing them with like my piano skills also is a testament to people working on their crafts and being ready to, not that was an audition for me, but it's like, if I was able to play a request just like that for some people who wanted to just hear music, that goes to show that all my hard work that I put into learning theory and learning chords and learning how it all works in chord progressions and stuff, for that moment in that room, for me to show off those skills, led me to becoming part of a bigger circle community. It's like, hey, when that luck and timing is in your favor, be sure you also have that hard work that you put into your skill in whatever it is you do.
I don't think it's the case all the time, but I do believe that when people see, it's not you individually, but when they see people who've achieved influence and success through gifts, through musical talent or things, and then obviously leveraging platforms to help get that message out, they don't instantly think about the years of work for that magic moment to happen, right? Like if you look at every musician, I mean, hell, you started even before you could walk, those Sundays, right? The taking over the choir at 10. Mm-hmm. And then when you're 20 something, they're like, where did this guy AJ come from? He sounds pretty nice, right? But he's quote unquote overnight success. And so you can't hack success, right? Like you can't. It's when preparation meets the right timing, meets opportunity, meets everything. But then all through it, you can't give up, right? Like whether it's making videos on YouTube or whether it's, doing podcasts, like, dude, people quit after 10 shows. People quit after 10 videos, 10 episodes. And you're like, why?
Yeah, it's easy to do.
But why?
That.
I mean, but think about like but your reason was far greater than view count, right? And if you judge, if you tie your success as a creator to view count and sub count, then you're always going to lose because there's always going to be some person with more. But
Oh yeah,
it's silly. Yeah.
completely. Yeah, I mean, what I had to say about that is, when I do visit colleges and stuff, and I've done a couple master classes, though I'm not a master, on just social media and YouTube in general. And it's like, you cannot look at that view count number because every person's beginning journey, yeah, we might have had a video that randomly hit out of nowhere, but we still had to put out those things so people that we loved, like when I talk to musicians specifically, if I tell them to just go on the iTunes pop charts and look at those songs and cover those songs and you'll get views, that may be true. But at the end of the day, I have fans who come up to me at Disneyland who give me a hug, a big bear hug, or they come up to me and say, your music really changed my life. And you're not going to get that from just copying what you think is the right formula for you to get views. It comes from me having, I have 500 videos out there, and sure, I haven't reached 1 million subscribers, but I've shown my heart, and I know at least 400 of those videos, and I've shared my journey, and I wasn't afraid for you to see me in the beginning. So then when people, even if somebody never heard of me and watched now from my beginning video all the way to my end, that I know that they could at least relate to the human side of me, even if they don't like my music. And at the end of the day, they could come up to me if they ever meet me and say, hey, look, I respect your journey. And we can look at each other and see humans, you know what I mean? Who have stories to tell, and not just, oh, you're a musician who creates really cool content, So I always, that means more to me than having 180 million views or whatever it is, just the fact that I can connect to people.
I think that's the tough thing, right? You have both, right? You have the influence and the human touch, which what leads to the other is arguable. We obviously both side on this, or sit on the side of it's the heart that gets the views, right? Like it's hard to work it the other way. You talked about cover music, which I think in podcast world is, shouldn't you just get the biggest names imaginable and then they'll post it for you and then boom, right? But it's like,
interesting.
No, because one, you do it for the love of doing it and the storytelling, just like if you were to cover somebody's music, let's say, right? Like you're not doing that for clout, and they might not care that it's you. They just want to hear a different version of the song that they love as sung by the original artist. And but the thing for the young folks or anybody listening, whether you are aspiring to be a musician or a podcast or anything, is view count shouldn't matter. Who actually comes on your show shouldn't matter. What comes as a result of that person coming on the show should matter zero. If you don't have it in your heart to pump out the content, it's not going to work. Not because the content sucks, because you're going to give up, right? Because if you don't have the fire, sure, we can look at your 500 videos, rank them from most popular to not most popular, apply some metric to when it was whatever, right? Like come up with what are the components to make it a hit or viral video. I could do that with the same, any podcaster, any creator can use that. But then what are you going to do? You're going to like systematically data your way into like coming up with, every single video or interview should be about this particular topic with this particular guest. Like then
the burnout comes way faster.
Right. But then it's silly. So this is the 50th episode that we are recording on the show.
Oh, wow. Congrats,
thanks,
man. That's really great.
Which is insane because the first episode was uploaded exactly 10 weeks ago. And because we have all this time, and not just me having time, our guests have time. And it's a great time to be an Asian American. It missed all the stuff that we're being dragged through. it's a time where people are starting to reflect on what it actually means to be us and what our story is,
Yeah.
and why
Yeah.
it matters. And so many of us have leaned away from it at certain parts of our lives through shame and equating our parents with who we are in that identity and some of the challenges and frustrations that we have with our misunderstanding of culture, and then we shun it, or we just think that, if I go to the right school, if I marry the right person, if I get the right job and the right money, somehow that will shield me from the discrimination and the racism that occurs in the world. And that's just not true.
Yeah.
So it's been fun, and I look at, cool, I wanted to race to 50 episodes. That was something that was important to me. And in March, everybody, everything sort of shut down. So I said, cool, I'm just going to go one a day, one every other day, whatever the pace was to try to get here.
Which is a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you, man. But it's fun because this is fun. I talk to old friends. I meet new friends. We talk, and then we throw it up in the universe. And the same thing. If I were to judge, do I create the 51st episode based on what the download count is during the first 10 weeks? That's a really dumb way to look at, is this making a difference in somebody's life, right?
Like
there's some stuff
I always say too.
There's some stuff that I listen to during the editing process and I start to tear up saying, shit, like that hit me hard, even on the, on the re-listen. So
right.
You've been doing this for just even on the, let's just take being on the internet for about 15 years now, right? Between MySpace and YouTube.
Sure.
In your infinite wisdom of hindsight and being a veteran of this now, and you were so humble. You said, I did a master class, but I'm not a master. Many would argue that you are, and you are one of the OGs of Asian Americans in new media. What have you learned in the last 15 years about yourself and about Asian Americans being proud to showcase their talents and put it out there?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really have to start really talking about being Asian American until the last 5-6 years. I think that's when I really started having, more of a perspective on what that actually meant. Because my main thing was always, and it almost seems naive, like it's just about the music. Yeah, Filipino American festivals keep inviting me to these things, but it's more than just about Filipino, or it's about my music, right? Then over the years, I start meeting people who I mentioned earlier, who literally come up to say, I've listened to you since middle school. So playing these college shows in the last 2-3 years, that's actually the age, right? So
you're right.
So every single show, I can guarantee at least 50% of them will say, I've listened to you since middle school or high school or whatever it may be, right? But it's either of those things. So that started hitting me a lot. And then you hear the conversations that are like, I had nobody to really look up to, and then they start saying, you and your friends, when I see you guys jamming together, that really inspired to bring me and my friends together and stuff. And my parents, they want me to become a doctor, but I love music. Do you have any advice? Like things like that. Then I started looking at it as like a cultural thing, that like, yeah, we aren't really, as you were saying earlier, encouraged to leave that linear path to go to this non-traditional world, even within my own family, who's very supportive. But like a lot of people will still say, why don't you just go on American Idol? Like, why are you making YouTube video? They want to see something that they can see on TV and be like, oh, my son or my nephew is a real musician, not seeing everything that I'm doing behind the scenes. But in the beginning, as I said, it wasn't as important, but really helping to be some kind of representation or a role model to these people really has had me look at being Asian American in such a different light. And if I can be that for one person, as you were saying about your podcast, just to make a difference in one person's life, if someone is like, that guy AJ is Filipino. That's really cool. I'm Filipino too. He plays ukulele. I have one. I'm going to start making songs. You know what I mean? Like, this is really cool, you know? And there are some like memes going on lately online where it's like a typical Filipino in a certain era, which was like 2012 to 2015. They're wearing like a Filipino flag jacket. They have ukulele, and then they have AJ Rafael album. You know what I mean? Like, dude, like, I don't even care if people are like clowning on it, or it's like a light joke. You know, I'm like, dude, if I was a part of that movement, man, then like I've already done my job here on this earth as a musician, but more so as a person that somebody can look at and be like, I'm proud to be Asian American because of this guy. I'm proud to be Filipino because of AJ. I'm proud to be Filipino because of Jeremy Passion, because of Gabe Bondoc and these other YouTube OGs, and be myself. And to be honest, I totally forgot what the question you asked. I just kind of went on a rant. Not a rant.
No,
a
you answered it because it's
session.
what's the perspective of hindsight, right? How have you progressed and what have you learned? And that's beautiful, man, because I think a lot of us realize that we're talented enough and we're gifted enough, and whether it is voice or music, it's universally appreciated. But
Sure.
context matters much more than the content. We've been saying that a lot today, right? And it's when some kid sees you, it's because he can see himself or she can see herself in you. And that matters because they won't see that in name any other non-Filipino or non-Asian super duper famous successful person, right? And so it's important and you know, we're all still on our journey. Nobody should be put on the pedals to say that person has achieved success, because it's not a finish line. There's no finish line.
Yep.
You run your race as hard as you can, and when it's your time to go, you go, right? And so I want people to also realize that as one, everybody has the ability to inspire somebody. You don't need to be past some sort of arbitrary like accomplishment barrier to then speak on a panel, to turn on a YouTube channel, or to come on an interview show, right? Everybody, look, my 3-year-old teaches my 1-year-old stuff. Like, he's a teacher, he's a mentor, right? And he
That's
cares.
amazing.
But any parent, any sibling, you know that, right? But when we grow up, we have this like, I'm not accomplished enough. My title, I've had people reject to come on the show and say, I don't think, I've seen who's come on your show and I just don't think, excuse. Why? And I would argue that the journey story is much, much more important than I don't know who would be
the numbers
correct.
and stuff.
I don't know. If I don't know who the most who I don't know who's the richest Asian American person. I don't know, right? Like if Jack Ma, I know he's not Asian American, but right, like his perspective would be different because his money and his success has changed his perspective on life. But I want to encourage everybody out there. Share your story, number one, but share your story in a medium that reaches the kids that look like you, because it's not to exclude others and it's not to discount others' stories, but we have a lack, given how big of a population we are, not just in the States, but globally. I think we have a lack of storytelling from our perspective. And that's why I started the show. That's why so many of our friends continue to tell our stories. And yes, a lot of it is rooted in Asian humility, right? Don't ever brag. Keep your head down. Work hard. And then a lot of religious influence of the same thing. Don't brag. Don't brag. If you're good enough, they'll find you.
Very true.
But we also then internalize that so much that we never objectively are proud of the stuff that we've done. But again, this is not me trying to put myself on a pedestal, but I've spoken at schools. I've spoken at things, and the Asian kid that awkwardly walks up to you at the end of the thing and just either says thank you or gives you that nod, like, that's why you do it, right? Because it was so important that she saw you on stage, because somebody that doesn't look like me could have said the same exact damn thing and it hits different. And so that's
so true.
And you talked about platforms and influence, and I think what you are starting to do now, as you said 5-6 years ago, having that realization that you have figured out your audience, not even from a business perspective, but from a heart perspective, because the money stuff takes care of itself. That's where your impact and your legacy lies, right? Because sorry, I don't know, like you are going to do more influencing young folks that look like you, whose parents tell them that they need to be a nurse, that they need to be a doctor, because those things still exist. And so tell us a little bit about what you've been working on the last, I don't know, we'll do it in two buckets. The last year that you're excited for, and then let's go micro into the last 8 weeks of all of us not seeing
Of
a whole lot of
quarantine.
sunlight. Yeah. What are you working on, and what's got you excited, man?
Yeah, I mean, I hinted at it a little earlier, but I've gotten into like the musical theater / acting world a little more. So in 2014, I took like a hiatus from music, which I then took a deep dive into music directing. So in a musical, for those who are not familiar, there's a director, there's a musical director who handles all the music perspective, and there's choreographer usually, right? So I started taking the job as music director because of my experience at church and teaching music and things like that, which then got me involved to actually like audition for shows. And because I saw people on stage, I'm like, I could also do that as well. I've done some plays in high school and college, and and wanting to be funny and like so yeah, musical theater has really taken over, man. Like I got to be in East West Players Mamma Mia last year. We ran for 11 weeks. I was the role of Pepper, which is a comedic role. I played Turk in a production of Tarzan. He's the funny best friend, So it's been really a different and a change of just everything, right? Like it's so different. And as I was saying earlier, being around actors who not necessarily have that social media mindset, it's been cool meeting actors and being like, hey, why don't you make why don't you make videos on YouTube? Your voice is so good. If you just put out a video a week. And again, that's harder than it sounds. And you creating freaking a podcast, like 50 podcasts in 10 weeks is freaking hard. So people need to realize that. But if you set your mind to it, you know what I mean? And also what you were saying about quality earlier, how that shouldn't matter as much as the story and the heart of it. That is very, very, very true. Anyway, so theater stuff has been really exciting me. I've been putting on this show called Crazy Talented Asians every 2 months, and just bringing my Asian / Asian American friends on stage, not to give them another platform per se, but for an audience member to see, because we did our first one at this venue called Rockwell in LA, and no shade or anything to them, but it's mostly a white audience. I mean, that's theater in general. It's mostly white.
Yep.
So when I'm bringing a whole full Asian cast, naturally that's going to bring Asians into the door to see people who they relate to and their friends or whatever. To see an almost all Asian audience at the Rockwell, to me, was like historic almost. It was like, for me to see that, right? So it's not only for the artists to have another platform, because a lot of them are really successful already. They don't need another cabaret to like promote themselves or whatever, but they do it because it's fun and because I'm their friend.
Yeah. But
it's really for that kid in the audience, again, to look and say, wow, theater, which is white dominant industry, this person did more than just Miss Saigon. They've been in Wicked, they've been in Mamma Mia, they've been in Next to Normal, these shows that I just see as white. And I could do that too. Yeah. So that's really what's been getting me excited lately. And I feel like it's fulfilling more of my purpose on this earth. So it's not just for my own music. It's for me to play for people who are inspiring people, me to just be the accompanist to the singer, if you will, like literally and also metaphorically, right? Like I just want to support people who are down for that mission. So that's what's been going on in the last couple years, which is a little departure from what I do as a singer-songwriter, but at the same token, it's still in the vein of bringing people together through music.
That's cool. You mentioned something that got me thinking about, we talk about the importance of people seeing us on a platform. And the second level to that is what you do with that platform matters so much in the platform itself, because we see so many people that look like us that have these positions and don't do anything to help, right, the agenda or inspire.
Interesting. Yeah.
But the third level, and you mentioned it, is none of it matters if the people are not in the seats to hear it, right? It's the audience, right? If it's an all Asian cast, right? Like we have this leadership summit of badass Asian Americans, but there's no young Asian kid in the audience to listen and to be inspired.
That's so true. Yeah.
Then we've missed the boat, right? Like, so that's why I love the internet, right? Because it removes that barrier. Physical is so amazing because you get to experience it, right? And I think sort of the things that we've been lucky to have realized, as crappy as it has been for the last 8 weeks or so, is this notion of things going virtual across the board, and then to be able to speak to audiences. I mean, heck, you've been doing it for 15 years through MySpace and YouTube and all the other channels, but it's this removal of the physical necessity for us to communicate, because kids in Nebraska don't get to go to Asian American anything. Kids in, there's Asian kids, there's Filipino kids up in, I don't know, in Louisiana.
I played a show in Indiana, and there was only like 30 people there, but I was like, I'm glad y'all are here.
But they probably waited for you. We're looking forward to you, right? Because when we live in LA and Southern California, we get spoiled, right? Like, oh, it's another collaboration. No, it's another talent show. There's so many choice. But when you go to these areas where people, and you hear their stories of how their families moved there, and you're like, holy crap, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal. And think about, I mean, dude, you grew up in Moreno Valley where, it wasn't like majority Asian, but it wasn't all white and then you, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, look, if you talk to other people, like, Jubilee Jason grew up in Missouri, right? Like, that's crazy.
That's so
literally
random to
one,
me.
right? But I mean, his parents were professors, so like that all makes sense. But like, if you think about the impact, and I think that's sort of what drives people like him too, right? To go through the emotions of, doing things in LA is important, but I want to create a medium where I can talk to the kids in the rural part of Texas or in, I don't know, Wisconsin, where there's just not a lot of us. So, man, it's exciting. That is cool, and I think your evolution is living proof that never ever ever should so much pressure on yourself to be defined by one thing. An entire generation knows you as YouTube star AJ Rafael, and another generation of people will know you as something different, not greater, but just different.
Yeah.
And I mean, look at our big brothers in Far East movement, right? They started rapping in college, and now they own a label and like they direct stuff, right? Like,
and it's all legacy moves.
Yeah.
I think, which is so cool, man. Like they get to share that they had this amazing booming career and #1 singles and stuff, but now they help in getting other artists out there. And it's really cool. And the evolution, that's very cool for you to acknowledge all of this stuff I'm saying, because I don't get to kind of recollect or look back on it often, because we're always all trying to make moves. You know what I mean? Everyone's always trying to hustle and grind and look towards what's next. But I do think it's important for someone like Far East Movement to look back and say, this is really important what I did for this community, and for me to do that even just now, to see that and to look back on it is really important, I think, for anybody.
It's wild, man. So James was a couple years older than I was. He was at UCLA and I was at USC, and we met through the Korean Student Association network then. And I threw a party at I forget what it was called, but it was the big club in downtown LA. 333 South Boylston was the name. It was like where everybody had their things, and we had a big USC UCLA party. And I remember I paid Far East Movement something crazy like $300 to come and perform. And I felt bad asking, but I said, hey, this is my budget, but I, as a favor, I don't know, like, would you guys do it?
Mm-hmm.
and they were just so grateful. Can you imagine offering $300 to Far East Movement now and telling,
To Far East Movement.
and then to tell you thank you? But this was 2003 when they were still going to college, when they were still, like
Yeah.
James finished law school, rapping during it's crazy, right? Like, and then
That's
so
a gnarly
yeah,
story.
so when you see them where they are now, and you're like, where'd they come from? I was like, dude, like everybody's got a backstory. Um,
Yeah, you only see the tip of the iceberg, right?
right.
Like we were saying earlier, is like no one
It's
sees the
wild, man.
years of all that stuff under the surface.
Yeah.
So
So cool, man. Thank you for sharing some very, very personal stories with us today. And um, it's so cool to know, I think, to know that your impact in the world is something that you objectively admit, and it hasn't affected you in a way. And just the things that you share about gratitude and about your family and about the journey, and you not resting on your laurels and trying to collect, checks for the rest of your life, but challenging yourself to do something different because your life's purpose and mission is far greater than just royalty checks and just being comfortable.
yeah,
It's the pursuit of something greater. Um, really, really grateful. Would love for you to help us finish out the show in the way that we do all of our shows, which is in the form of a letter to the Asian American community. Dear Asian Americans is ultimately a conversation and a letter to us, more importantly, from us, and most importantly, for us, because these are conversations that I don't think you and I had growing up. And we're completely happy with the way that we are now. But I just imagine how it could have been different had we had these conversations in our ears as we were growing up, to tell us that we're not alone and that you could pursue all sorts of different things and it's just going to turn out okay. So um, I'll start the letter, and if you can help finish us out in completing the letter. Dear Asian Americans.
your stories are important. Your journey is important. Um, you wanting to be a nurse, doctor, lawyer is valid, but you wanting to be a musician, a comedian, a writer is just as valid. You speaking up matters. You acknowledging your mental health and taking care of yourself doesn't have to be exclusive to you listening to your parents and wanting to take care of them as well. You can edit all these breaks, obviously.
No, the silence is the emphasis, man. Keep it all.
You wanting to make a difference outside of just your grades is important and matters more than you know. All of these things can influence someone younger than you to grow up and see a bigger picture. You being Asian American is not a hindrance. It makes you powerful. Being Asian American doesn't mean you're less American. Dear Asian Americans, let's continue to stand up for each other and to acknowledge when someone is doing good, not just to acknowledge them when they get below an A minus. We're all doing our part, and if we continue to lift each other up, then we all can if we continue to lift each other up, we can fight through the hate and divisiveness that is happening right now in our country. That's it. That's.
No, thank you, man. I don't say this lightly, but I think it is. You have influenced positively an entire generation of young people who saw themselves in you, felt their stories through your lyrics, and are inspired by far more than your musical notes and your lyrics in the way that you've lived life and have been so open and transparent in sharing your life story. And to know that where it started may have not been such a pretty place in your life, but where you have been and where you continue to go is and will continue to be the best way for you to honor your father's legacy. And you have, I think, you're just getting started, man.
31 years old, man.
The world is upside, right? If you live to 90, you're just one third through, right? Like not even halftime yet, man.
Yeah, no, you're right. Sometimes we think, I'm sure that you've thought about it too. Like, when you hit 30, you're like, damn, have I done enough? But you're right, man. We're all just getting started, dude. Like,
dude, wait till you have kids. You're like, it's so late. Everybody, not
bro,
young anymore.
I know you're talking about your 3-year-old teaching your 1-year-old. We have a senior dog, a 16-year-old dog that we took from my family, teaching our 4-month puppy. 4-month-old puppy, dude. And it's been the most hectic thing. It's like my girlfriend's running around right now, and as I'm in this interview, taking care of our little puppy, because it's so hectic, man. I can't even imagine with kids. It's much
beautiful.
respect.
I mean, look, it's life. There's no right way to live it. There's so many ways to learn. But man, thank you so much for making time. It's been an honor to have this conversation with you. Thank you for sharing so much of your personal stories with us. And let's get through the social distancing crap so more people can come up and hug you, man. That's the goal.
I miss the hugs, man.
Virtual hugs aren't
Thank
just
you,
the
Jerry.
same, But until then, stay the hell home, everybody. Listen to all.
Stay home.
Go back and watch all of AJ's 500 YouTube videos. Get that sub count over 1 million. They give you some sort of a special plaque at 1 million, right?
They do it. You know what? It's a materialistic thing. It's one of those materialistic things that I really would love to just put on the wall. So yeah, my goal is to reach 1 million subscribers.
We got about
year.
60K more to go. Well, I don't know. Again, that's not your definition of success, but it is a result of all your hard work. So congrats, man. Can't wait to hear what's next cooking for you. And thanks again for your time. It really means a lot.
Yeah, thank you. And congrats again on 50 episodes.
Thank you,
Very
man.
freaking cool.
Well, hopefully we can get to 500 and chase after you, man. Keep enough of our stories, enough of our stories that matter that needs to be told. So easy job for me.
Amen. Amen. All right, y'all. Peace out. Thanks for listening. Appreciate it.
Thanks, AJ.